Good evening and welcome to the meeting of the Audit and Corporate Governance Committee. Present at the committee this evening we have Councillors Fitzsimmons, Froggatt, Buckley, Carey, Friend, Hart, Keane, Marks, Parish and Warburton. Also present are officers of the Council and from the Council's external auditors. I'll now hand over to the Chair to formally open the meeting. Councillor Fitzsimmons, can you hear me?
Just about now. It went funny, but can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you clearly now, so you can formally open the meeting.
Okay, thanks. Welcome everybody. Apologies, Brian. Declarations of interest. Minutes of the previous. Okay, Matthew, you're on with the review. Item 4, review of Ombudsman's complaints, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this is the annual report to this committee, providing the statistics issued by the Local Government and Social Care Ombudsman, this time for the year ending 31st of March 2020. I may move around the report a little bit, so my apologies for that, but at 3.3 of the report on page 9, you'll see that the annual report and data is published online for the public to review. This information is already in the public domain anyway. And has been for a few months. The overall performance for the year ending 31st of March 2020 is actually set out at Appendix A, which is page 15 of the pack. Certainly the pack as it appears electronically. You can see there that the overall complaints are up to 51 from 36 last year, clearly 48, 43, 40 for years preceding. In relation to decisions, 7 complaints were upheld, and that's 64% of those complaints which were actually investigated, not 64% of the complaints actually made or the complaints and queries received. That figure is somewhere around 14%, which is roughly about what it was the year before. You will also see that a majority of the complaints and queries that were put to the Ombudsman weren't actually taken forward. The Council has a 100% compliance rate with the recommendations or directions given by the Ombudsman, and there is some table of comparators which is at page 12 of the report, and those are sit for benchmarking authorities where we compare ourselves to other authorities. You can see there the compliance rate, the upheld rate and the satisfactory remedies with those other authorities. Just finally, in introducing the report, I refer you again. I said I might be moving around the report a little, and my apologies for that. But if you go down to pages 17 onwards, you'll see that there are details of complaints, upheld complaints, and those not upheld. Those are just there just to put a little bit more meat on the bones in terms of some of the types of complaints which come in. And how they've been dealt with. So, Chad, that is the report in terms of the Ombudsman's findings up to the end of March of 2020. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that. Are there any comments or questions, please? Okay, happy to note the report. Okay, do we need to take a formal vote on that?
I think, Chair, maybe just getting somebody to move and second, and then if it's the will of the meeting, if people could indicate, please.
I'll move it.
I'll second that.
Okay.
And if you just check, Chair, everybody is in favour of just moving on without any other recommendation to officers?
Yes.
Everybody happy?
Yes,
okay,
yes.
Thanks for that. Move on to next item 5. Write-off of unrecoverable debt.
Thank you, Chair. I'll take this item if that's okay. What is in front of members tonight is the regular report identifying the debts that I've written off in my role as Council Section 151 officer. A brief introduction highlighting the levels of income that we actually collect. in terms of £114 million a year in council tax, £117 million in business rates, as well as other miscellaneous income and housing benefit. We continue to have very good collection rates, but nonetheless, there are sometimes debts that we're unable to collect. And so in the table at section 4, you can see the debt that I have approved to be written off because it has just become completely irrecoverable, both by type of debt, and then also in section 5 we show the age profile of that debt. And as you can see in section 5, most of the debt is actually getting quite old now, so we've tried to chase it for as long as we can, but in the end there is some debt we just can't collect. In total, I've approved so far this year £148,000 worth of debt to be written off. The report is here for members to note that I've done that under delegated procedures.
Okay, thanks, Vincent. Are there any comments or questions? Yes, David.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Good evening, members. Good evening, Linton. Nice to see you. I just wanted to ask a question on business rates written off. I know there's a small amount of council tax written off in the report, but could you point to any business rates that have been written off and how much they are and where they are in the report, or are we to consider that there aren't any business rates that have been written off? Thanks, Linton.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, you're quite right. In the last period, I've not written off any business rate debt. So yes, we occasionally do have to write some off, but again, we try to go as long as we can before we can collect it. But I've not written anything off so far this year for business rates.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you, Linton. Thank you, Chair.
Any other comments or questions, please?
Yes, Chair. Oh, Chair,
I'll take Steve, and then I've got Ian.
Okay. Chair, it's just a small thing on pages 22 and 23. We've got the tables of debtor type, and for the avoidance of anybody's mistake, I did just wonder if it's wise to have the officer's name in the column saying debtor, just in case somebody thinks that's the name of the debtor rather than the officer who's chasing it.
Point taken, Councillor. Yeah, there definitely aren't debts by those particular officers. It's that officer that is recommending it to me to write off.
Okay, Ian.
Yes, also on page 22 under 4.2 social care debt, there's this rather intriguing thing in the last line. It talks about a specialist legal team to assist with the pursuit of more complex debts. For example, property held overseas. Strikes me as a slightly unusual comment to have in a report of this nature. I just wonder what that's about.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Marks. I mean, we do occasionally have that kind of thing, particularly with social care debt. If you've got a client who may have retired abroad, owns a property abroad, has then come back to the UK, maybe has gone into care and requires support by the council, and potentially then might die owing money to the council. So we do then have the complexities of trying to recover some of those assets, and sometimes it is property that's actually overseas.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Linton.
Any other questions, comments? Okay, the recommendation is to note the report. So if you want, we have a mover and a seconder, please.
I'll move we note the report, Chair.
Thanks, Colin. Seconder.
I'll second.
I'm happy to second.
Thanks.
Yes, Chair.
Okay, everyone happy?
Yeah.
Good.
Yes.
We'll move on to the next one then.
Thank you, Chair. I'll take this one again. I'll take this one again if that's okay. We don't have Danny Mather with us tonight, so I probably won't go into quite as much detail as Danny might normally go into. I'm quite happy to take questions at the end. There's a few things I want to draw to members' attention though through the quarterly Treasury Management report. The first one, if I can take you to it, is in section 3.19. I've taken a decision under my delegation within Treasury Management I placed a deposit of £9.2 million with Santander, which was paying a 2% interest rate to us. And that was done by part of a standby letter of credit, which was part of the link to the deal that the council had done to acquire Together Energy, but to ensure that Together Energy were able to access better credit terms from BP. So I'm flagging up that I took that decision under delegation. However, what I can also now tell members is that that is coming to its end because a decision was taken by Cabinet a couple of months ago that they would now support Together Energy not having its energy through BP, and it's actually changed to another company called Ørsted. So we're in the process of winding down that standby letter of credit, and there won't be a need for BP to have that facility in place going forward. In section 4 of the report, we've perhaps given a little bit more breakdown than usual around what we're now referring to as non-treasury investments. I think there are probably a couple I'd like to draw your attention to within this section. One is around the council solar farms. The second farm isn't yet complete. It was delayed due to flooding earlier in the year, and then COVID has delayed it becoming fully online. And so the early revenue from that has been slightly lower than we'd have expected. And the other one I wanted to draw your attention to, because I know how important an investment this is by the council, was Birchwood Park. And I think it really does show what a good investment it is and how well it's being managed, that even during these difficult times at the moment with COVID, that we're managing to collect 95% of rent, and it's still retaining its occupancy at 96%. The other item I just wanted to draw your attention to, linked to those property investments, is actually at 4.6.13, and it's just a reminder that as part of the council strategy on investing in property, we have actually established a reserve to mitigate risks to that portfolio. So we have £10 million sitting in that reserve, and we're continuing to put 15% contribution of all of our rents into that reserve. And the reason for doing that is if we hit particular issues and some of the investments aren't able to pay the returns that we're expecting, it doesn't impact directly on the council's revenue budget because we have a reserve to mitigate that. What I think we're seeing already, though, is that even during COVID, we're not at the moment needing that level of reserve at the level it is. So that gives me some reassurance that even if things get a lot worse on some of our investments, we can cover it off without it directly impacting on council's services. Section 5 goes through the detail of our borrowing. I think one I would want to point out in 5.4, we mentioned that we've got £240 million of variable interest rates. Obviously, members will be aware that most of the borrowing that council does is fixed rate. That way we know exactly what our outgoings are going forward. The £240 million worth of variable, the majority of that relates to the issuance of the council's bond, in total £150 million of that. And although that is a variable bond, it's actually capped at a figure of around 3.8%, so it could never be more than that. However, at the moment, because it's linked to inflation, we're finding that the actual rate of our bond has dropped dramatically. So we're only paying just over 0.8% for that borrowing. So again, quite bizarrely, something that is a benefit of COVID in terms of the costs that a council, for the council in terms of its borrowing. At section 6 in the report, I refer to the prudential indicators. These were the indicators that you set as a full council when the budget was set back in February. And I can report that we haven't breached any of those indicators during this first part of the year. And the final part of the report, which I won't go into in detail, it is the economic update. I think all I would say on that is that probably all of us recognise that the economic update is probably changing on a daily, if not hourly basis at the moment. So it's only as good as the point it was written. But really trying to look ahead and see what the impacts are on monetary policy, particularly given all the changes around COVID and with impending Brexit. But I'll leave it at that, and I'm happy to take questions.
Okay, thanks, Linton. Are there any questions, Ian?
Yes, on two topics, both sort of fairly contentious ones, I'm afraid. If I just deal with our friend Redwood first of all. First of all, just to check whether Linton, I think I understand it, I may or may not be right, is an observer rather than a director. I just wondered why he wasn't a director, and if he's only an observer, whether he's allowed to ask questions. So that, and the second Redwood question is what exactly their dividend policy is, and when do we expect we might get some dividends out of Redwood, accepting they're a little bit behind with their forecast at the moment. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Yes, you're quite right, Councillor Marks. I am an observer on the board. We took a decision, or Cabinet took a decision, when the investment was made into Redwood to not proceed with placing somebody from the council on the board. I think the main reason for that is how complicated running a bank is, and it was seen that probably the best thing to do was have people that were other non-execs, independent people being placed onto the board of that bank to provide challenge, for the PRA to continue giving the challenge that they do. But I am able to attend the meetings and I am able to ask questions. There are probably only a couple of people within the council, and hopefully I would include myself, that would have the qualifications that could sit on the board of that bank. However, I cannot sit on the board of the bank because I am the council's Section 151 officer, and I would then, whilst if I was on the board, I would be having to make sure that I was doing everything I could on behalf of the bank for the benefit of the bank. By attending as our shareholder representative, I'm there to safeguard the council's investment, and I'm there acting on behalf of the council whilst observing those meetings, not acting on behalf of the bank. So that, to me, is the main reason why we took that decision that way round.
And the dividend?
And the dividends are still in line with, as expected, with the original business case, and there was never a plan for dividends to be paid until the 5th year of the bank's operation.
Okay, thank you. Do you want me to, can I go on to my second topic? Together Energy. There's 2 points. I don't quite understand why we had to make this decision on the 8th of September with the leader and the deputy leader making an urgent decision. I just could do with a bit of clarification about why it was so urgent. And then the second point is, and Linton knows because I asked this question at the Treasury Management Board, which I stood in for Councillor Axel the other day. There is just concern that, I mean, of the council, the energy companies that councils have been involved with, and there are 3 of them, sort of Portsmouth, Bristol and Nottingham, they've all had problems. I mean, we've just taken over this, had this investment in Bristol. Now, I understand the answer to this, that the difference is that it wasn't council officers trying to run energy companies, which I accept is a huge problem, that we're actually taking over some people with some expertise. But I just think it might be useful to put this into the public domain, why the council believe that our investment in Bristol is going to be okay when all other councils have failed fairly miserably in their investment in energy companies.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll perhaps take it slightly differently in terms of trying to explain this. In terms of the urgent decision, the Cabinet had delegated certain items to officers at their previous meeting, recognising and knowing that it was likely that Together Energy would be bidding for the customer book for Bristol Energy. That is now in the public domain, that has happened. But as part of the final negotiations by Together Energy Limited, they managed to reduce the price they were paying, but that required a decision to be taken that hadn't been delegated to officers. And the decision was taken very quickly by Together Energy and required an urgent decision in order to ratify that decision within, well, the decision was almost taken over a weekend and needed to be made within 24 to 48 hours of them having decided that, in order that the deal could progress. And it was a requirement that Bristol Council themselves were putting in place. On that basis, it had to be taken as an urgent decision, and it was taken passed the chair a scrutiny to ensure that he was happy with it to be taken as an urgent leader decision, and the leader and the deputy leader took that decision between themselves. All of the detail within that decision will also be going back to Cabinet in order that Cabinet have got full transparency on that decision and understand exactly what the leader and the deputy leader did. I probably can't say too much more in terms of the detail because of the fact that we're in a part 1 meeting. Some of the other would be a bit confidential to actually talk about at this time. In terms of why we can do this the way we're doing, I think you're right. What you have pointed out is that we've invested into an energy company that was already growing. It's being run by people with long experience of running energy companies, but also it's been set up in such a way that it hasn't got huge overheads. When we were originally looking at whether we should set up our own energy company, as a council, we got external advice and we looked in a lot of detail at the likes of Nottingham, Bristol, and what they'd already done. And it became quite apparent that their models were very expensive in terms of their overheads, in the way that they ran, and some of their decision making in terms of trying to be run as if they were part of a council and not being run as an energy company. Having invested into Together Energy, we've got a company that is properly operating as an energy company and has been able to bid for the customers that were previously with Bristol Energy, as Bristol Energy have sold off their customer book. And that's enabled them to grow the company a lot quicker, but without needing to take on all of the overheads that Bristol Energy previously had themselves. Hence immediately making them more profitable with a bigger margin because of the low overheads of Together Energy. I probably can't say much more than that in a public meeting.
You okay with that, Ian?
Okay, thank you, Linton. Yes.
If you need further clarification, you can always ring Linton directly.
Councillor Steve Parish, just coming in on that. Does Together Energy actually have any particular fixed assets, or is it the business model just mainly buying in energy now from Ørsted and shipping it to customers?
Yes, that is the main business model. Their assets are their customers, and the way you value an energy company is by the total number of customers they've got and for the length of the contracts they've got. One of the real advantages of Together is that they hedge their energy prices. They buy their energy at the same time as they fix their tariffs with their customers. So a number of their customers are on 1, 2 and 3 year fixed deals, meaning they know exactly what energy costs they've got and what income they're getting. I think in some ways deliberately not taking the approach that a lot of energy companies take in trying to undercut other competitors with very, very cheap deals that are actually loss-making. So Together aren't making loss-making deals. They've just got very good fixed rates and match the two things together.
Thank you. Probably not this committee's business particularly, but well accepted. We want it to succeed, and it would appear from which reports that if you can get through, it's a very good company to talk to, but getting through is a problem.
And that is something they've been working on and do recognise. As part of the Bristol deal, they are taking on a number of the Bristol staff from their call centres, etc. And I think they're hoping that will help improve some of that customer service as well.
Thank you.
Paul Warburton, Linton, thanks for that. It says within the paragraph 4.5.4 that the amounts that the council are given to sell Together Energy are going to be paid at a full commercial interest rate to the council. What's the commercial interest rate that's being given to the council?
I can't tell you what that commercial interest rate is because it is commercially confidential.
Okay, yeah, but it's
I would be happy to tell you what I'd be happy to tell you what that is outside of this meeting, and I can confirm that we agreed that amount as part of the original loan with Ofgem. It's the same rate that Ofgem would have charged them as well, just to make sure it was commercially viable.
Okay, but it's beneficial to Warrington.
Most definitely, yes.
And do you know what benefits so far as Together Energy have brought to the residents of Warrington? Is that currently being is that happening, or is it likely that that will be a future thing? I know that they were planning on opening an office in Warrington, but I was wondering how many customers there are in Warrington.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many Warrington customers we've got at the moment. They have already employed, I think the figure as of last week was 15 new staff that are Warrington based, and deliberately targeting those people that have been long-term unemployed or young people that are struggling to get into employment. So really targeting those kind of groups to help. And they are a national living wage employer as well. What they were planning, and I'm not sure that this has been released yet, but is looking at a Warrington tariff. And alongside that, there would be additional marketing, particularly now that they've moved to Orsted, and showing that they're giving 100% green energy as well. But I haven't got to hand how many new Warrington customers they've currently got, but I could get that to you after the meeting.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Anybody else?
Can I ask a question on that, please, Chris? Recognising that Together Energy are offering 3-year deals and reading the financial press, doesn't that make them less flexible and therefore less competitive with the other companies?
It also, though, fixes their costs, and I guess it's an individual customer decision, isn't it? If you want to make sure you know exactly what you're paying for your energy now for the next 1 year, 2 years, or 3 years, you can fix it. You know it's not going to go up. You also know it won't go down. So some people might choose to go with a variable rate that could be cheaper right this moment, but who knows in 6 months if that suddenly becomes a more expensive rate. So it is a bit, I think it does come down to customer choice, but if what you really want is to know exactly where you stand for a fixed period, then they do offer very good fixed rate deals.
So it's an either way choice, really.
I guess it's the same for anybody with their mortgage. You know, some people will fix their mortgage for 5, 10 years. Others were quite happy to take a very low interest rate now, but they will risk what happens to interest rates going forward.
Okay. Any more on this one? Okay, well, it's the recommendation is to note the reports.
It's sorry, Chair. It's also to note the.
David, did you want to speak?
Sorry, it was also to note the decision I took, Chair.
Yeah,
stand by letter of credit. Yeah.
Yeah, I think David indicated then.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And it is to do with the recommendations and 21.2. Just with some of the information on interest on commercial loans, as Councillor Warburton raised earlier on, and some of the unknown information under the delegated powers. I am happy to note the recommendations, but I'm not quite so sure on 21.2's point of endorsing the decision that's been made with the information that we've got. And just some advice really, Chair, on whether it's actually within the role of this committee to be endorsing decisions rather than noting or challenging or making sure the correct governance procedures have been through, but just to kind of say from my behalf, even if mine alone, I wouldn't be able to vote for endorsing the decision without the full information. So I hope that's useful, Chairman.
Okay, it's an interesting point you raised. Can you address that, Linton?
Yeah, I think it may be in some ways it's bad wording by us as officers on the recommendation. If you don't endorse it, I'm not quite sure what the sanction is anyway. So in some ways, I've taken this decision under a delegation. I think really I'm asking you to note that I've taken that decision. And if there is a decision further to that to be taken, because of the way this has been dealt with, it would be reported back to Cabinet for them to take that further decision anyway.
Okay,
it's very rare that the Audit Committee do take that way.
We'll take the first one first, 21.1. Can I have a mover and seconder for that recommendation?
Steve Parish will move.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay,
second.
and is that agreeable, that one?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Now for the second one, can we note and can we remove the word endorse?
Yeah.
Because David's made a good point there.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
21.2, we note the decision that has been taken under delegated authority.
Yes.
Is that
I'll
agreeable?
move again, Chair. Makes
Can I
sense.
move and seconder for that?
I'll move again, Chair. Yeah. I'll second.
Okay. Are we all happy with that now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, thanks for that, David.
Thank
We
you.
move on to item 7. Is Jean taking this one?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'll take this report. This is the annual report for risk management insurance that looks back over the last financial year. But this report also includes some reflection on the risk management response to the COVID-19 pandemic. You had the Q4 report at your meeting in July. And this annual report just provides further update on some of those key risks and how how they have been managed in the face of the pandemic. To take you through certain parts of the report, paragraph 3.3 to 3.6 are talking about how that risk management was put into place once the pandemic hit. And as you know, the risk of pandemic has been formally recognised as a strategic risk by the Council for quite a number of years. So back in 1617, it was recognised as a strategic risk, and then work with senior management when we had the refresh of the risk register in 1718. A lot of it was undertaken there to prepare for pandemic flu, and it was rated as a high risk, and the score was high. And I think what we've seen is the preparatory work around that has been adapted to respond to the current pandemic. So even though it's unprecedented in its impact, the value of the preparatory work in enabling the council to react has been really borne out there. We recognise even when we put this report together, it's very difficult to put anything together on response to the pandemic, because things are changing all the time, and things have changed again since we put this report together. But yes, I mean, the council is still focusing on recovery, even though we have gone back into restrictions again. And the other thing with this is the risk that this brings to financial stability. We've had the strategic risk 18 around our financial risks, and there is this significant financial challenge, as you were all fully aware, in response to COVID-19. So that is going to have an impact, as you're all fully aware, over the next year. The next section is on how the risks have moved over the year. If I take you to paragraph 4.6, at Q4, as I say, you reviewed the risk register then. The risk register is appended again at Appendix 1. It hasn't been changed. And this just gives you a flavour of the high risk, as you can see there. And 4.7 and figure 3 just summarises the highest risks that we have on that risk register, and it just lists them out for you there. And then at 4.9, we've just recognised some of the pressures and some of the movements on risk and how they've been dealt with during the year. And as well as risk increasing, we've had risks that have been reduced on the register as well and managed at an operation. And at 4.10, just linked into what used to be about the report, we had an escalated risk at strategic risk 24 during 1920, around having to strengthen arrangements in place around managing the portfolio for investments and so on.
We seem to have lost you, Jean.
And we've recently had a report by PwC into commercial governance arrangement. And one other to bring you that you've seen. Yes, I'm sorry, I think
it's a bit like Norman Collier's Act, this.
Like the best, Chair.
You might want to try
connection's
turning your
going in
video off.
and out at the minute. I'll just try. Okay, I'll send it now. Can you hear me better with that?
The bit that's coming through is clear.
Can you hear me any better now, Chair?
Yes.
Oh, right, okay, I'll try to carry on. Yeah, my connection isn't the best, so I'll try to carry on. Yeah, so we've just said there at paragraph 4.13 that 2/3 of the risk stayed stable during 1920, and we've noted the risk there around increased risk. And we've just put a 15 to show how that movement over the year from the previous year. Then section 5 of the report is the insurance activity. As we've noted there, we deal with Salford City Council insurance, £80,000. Anything that's more complex than that or over that amount goes straight to insurers. And at 5, we've noted there in figure 5 the insurance claims activity for the last financial year. We've noted there at point 4 that even though new claims in 1920 were slightly higher than the previous 3 years, they weren't significantly so. They're still lower than they were a few years ago, and you can see they're on trend. And we've repeated there what we said at 5.5 around the approach to risk management, the approach that Salford take, and the proactive approach that the council takes about being able to manage initial claims coming through. 5.6, we still have it dominated by highways, and we've shown increase in the value of non-highways claims as well. A lot of that is we're getting more high-value, complex, alleging breach of human rights and so on. And so there are more complex claims. And at 5.7, we've just noted how effective the work with the insurers has been to get the support and advice during the pandemic on a wide, range of issues. We've been able to provide advice back to officers and so on. So it has been a good relationship to get that advice from insurers. We've noted a summary of financial considerations and figure out a total cost of risk analysis, so not just the claims that were paid, but also the full cost of being able to provide those insurance settlements and so on. And then section 6.8 to 6.11 just gives you some information. I think you've had this before as well about the fundamental dishonesty claim that we've had through, and we had costs for 10,000 in Neva. We'll put some in that. I think that's the main point of the report. I'm happy to take any questions. I'm sorry about the audio quality, but I hope you followed most of that.
Okay, are there any questions or comments on this report, please? Yes, Ian?
Yeah, thank you, Jean. Just 2 queries on the risk register. The first one is SRR 16. It's the two with GDPR. I noted that's actually gone up from the previous quarter. I just wondered, I don't exactly understand why that's actually gone up, because we don't hear quite so much about GDPR, important though it is. And the second one you have actually referred to is SRR 24, which is the commercial investment. I mean, this is obviously the level of this is rated at 20, which is a high one. I mean, are we satisfied that we're actually mitigating this as much as we can? I mean, we are obviously concerned about this for obvious reasons, but I mean, should we not be doing more? I just wondered if you'd like to comment on that, please. Thanks, Jean.
Yes, thank you. If I take the GDPR risk first, and I'm sorry, but I haven't got an answer for you at this stage on that one. I need to take that back and get some from you.
Okay.
For you, and I can do that meeting. With risk 24, certainly I think when that went onto the register during this year, it was felt that it was scoring very high, that risk, and it was, you know, that the action was needed around management of the full portfolio and so on. I think since that time, there has been, you know, quite a lot of action that has been taken. I think it has been recognised. Mitigation needed to be put into place. Linton mentioned the sort of reserve that we put in place, certainly for the property investments. That was a high risk against the property investment portfolio, so that's been put in place. The other thing is we've had the external review by PwC, so we're just assessing the draft from that and all the they need. Sorry, is that?
No, I missed a little.
Marks.
I missed a little bit of that, Jean, because your sound went again. No, to use the expression, I hear what you say. I don't think I'm convinced that we're perhaps doing as much as we ought to. I remain to be convinced about that. I understand things are happening, and that's good. But whether we're doing enough, given the high potential risk, I need to be convinced about that. But thank you.
Chair, Steve Parish, do we have a particular risk of spending money in the pandemic that the government said they would reimburse and now hasn't?
Did you get that, Jean?
Yes. Yes, I did. And I think all those sort of financial risks are wrapped up in strategic risk 18, which is the risk around the financial position.
Can you hear me, Jean? I think it might be helpful if you could supply written answers to these questions. We're not getting your answers. Can you hear me? Okay, Linton, can you hear me?
I can hear you fine, Chair. Yeah.
Can you get Jean to put a written response to the questions?
Yeah, that's fine.
Are there any other questions that you want to put to Jean for a written answer at this stage?
I have these for significant financial.
Yeah. Does anyone remember Norman Collier?
I'm afraid.
Before our time.
Mr. Chairman, come.
Could I ask a question, Chair, about the strategic risk number 5, which is to do with it's education and maintaining high standards of performance. I know that the comment in it does actually address COVID as an issue, but I just wondered whether or not there should be a separate issue relating to COVID and educational attainment because of the ongoing problems with access to education for children. And it is likely to have a long-lasting impact on the standards of education, both primary and secondary.
Okay.
Interestingly, the risk itself hasn't changed in this report, but I think it probably has gone up in light of the COVID issues.
Any more questions for Jean to take note of? Okay, well, thanks, Jean. Sorry about the quality of the thing, but if you can supply a written answer to all members, that will be.
I will do, Chair.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
It's okay.
Did you say all members, Councillor Fitzsimmons? Thank you.
Yeah. No more questions on that. Okay, we'll move on to the next one. No, in fact, we'll go on to the work programme before we take on the external auditors. Has anybody got any comments on the work programme? Okay, we'll go back to item 8 then, and the external auditors progress. That'll be Andrew, will it?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Can I just check that you can hear me okay?
Yes, well, I can.
Excellent. Okay, thank you. So there's a few matters that I just want to update the audit committee on. First of all, we've had to make a change to the engagement lead for the 17-18 objection and audit. That's due to the fact that Robin Baker, who you knew was the engagement lead for 17-18, has unfortunately been absent from work due to illness since March, and we're not expecting him back anytime soon, unfortunately. So as a result of that, my colleague John Gregory took over the 17-18 objection, which I'll come to in a second, and I've taken over the running of the 17-18 audit, which I'll update you on as well. So I just wanted to notify the committee of that change to the audit team. In terms of the 17-18 objection, you'll be pleased to know that objection has now been determined. Just as a reminder to members, the objection related to the lawfulness of the council's investment in Redwood Bank, which it took in 2017. We've sent a statement of reasons to the objector and also to the council. I don't propose to go through the detail of that because it does stretch to a dozen pages, but what I can report to the audit committee is the fact that we concluded that there is no clear evidence that the council acted unlawfully in making that investment in the bank. As a result of that, we've decided not to seek a declaration to the court. And in addition, we also didn't feel that the matters at hand justified the issuing of a public interest report on the basis that we didn't identify any unlawful items, any significant failings in governance, or evidence of poor value for money. We have, however, made a non-statutory recommendation around some of the governance arrangements in place and making sure that any changes to decisions or investments made do receive appropriate scrutiny prior to approval. But that recommendation is not made under Schedule 7 of the Local Audit and Accountability Act and is a non-statutory recommendation. Happy to take any questions on the objection before I move on to the update on the audits.
Could I ask a question?
In the order I see you, Paul, I saw you first, and then I saw Steve. Paul, do you want to ask a question?
Thanks, Andrew. I was just wondering if Grant Thornton were going to issue a clear statement about the council's accounts and that they have been resolved and that the council have been cleared of any illegal acts or wrongdoings. Will that be something that Grant Thornton will do?
So when we do come to report our audit findings report in due course for 2017, we will refer to the objection and we will formally report in that report to the audit committee, but we wouldn't necessarily make a public statement to that effect beyond that.
Okay, but we could take it from what you're saying now is more or less a public statement, as this is a public recorded committee.
Yes, correct.
Thank you.
Steve?
More a question for Linton, really. Does that mean the accounts can now be published?
Did you get that, Linton? I don't think you got it.
He's gone funny. You've gone funny.
Linton, we can't hear you. You're mute.
Are you muted, Linton? I can tell Linton is pleased by the outcome, but yeah.
Wouldn't unmute.
Yeah.
There you go.
Did you hear the question?
Can you just repeat the question again, Councillor?
Does that mean the accounts can now be published?
No, it doesn't yet, and I think Andrew will come on to that because there's still some work that Grant Thornton need to do to finalise their audit of our accounts.
Okay, thank you.
Chris?
Right. Yeah.
Can I ask a question, Chris?
Yes, please.
Yeah, it's a Grant Thornton, and it's if they're recommending that more scrutiny takes place in incidences like this? Are they proposing the way that that scrutiny should take place? Is it scrutiny committee, audit and corporate governance, or the cabinet, or anyone else?
I believe that is a matter for the council to make its decision about how it authorises investments and any changes to those investments. The recommendation we make is that that there is appropriate scrutiny to the changes that are made following that initial member approval. So that ordinarily probably would mean a decision going back to cabinet, but that is really a matter for the council to take forward.
I think what we'll be doing there, Andrew, is that because it's an audit matter, a report will come to the audit committee, and this committee will make the decision about how it's to be scrutinised, rather than the cabinet, because we're effectively scrutinising them.
Yes, yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does, yes, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Linton, have you got something to say?
I just wanted to make a point on that. I mean, obviously, as officers, we knew that this non-statutory recommendation was going to be made for a while. We also had some comments that were made as part of the LGA peer review last year. And both of those things linked to some issues we wanted to improve around our governance. So more recently, we've had an external review undertaken by PwC. And part of that is giving us some recommendations for improving governance, particularly around our commercial acquisitions. My intention is that I would bring that report back here to this committee so that you can see what we're looking to improve around this decision making, bearing in mind that the decisions are still usually going to be taken by cabinet. But I think it's quite right that you understand the full governance process and the decision-making process around those investment decisions.
Well, if it comes to us first, because we might need to make some constitutional changes, we don't know yet. So, any more on this? Yes, Paul.
Sure. Could I ask Linton, now that the council has been cleared of any wrongdoings, if you could estimate the costs associated with this objection and the costs to Grant Thornton?
I will be able to, although Grant Thornton and myself are still in discussion over the audit fees for that year. So I probably wouldn't want to say exactly until we've agreed that between us. There are still some parts I'm challenging.
But it's also had a significant amount of, I suppose, demands on officer time as well. And do you have an estimate of how much time that this has actually cost the council in terms of officer time?
It has been a significant amount of time. I would say at its peak, it was probably taking 2 or 3 days a month of my time, possibly of Matthew as well, Matthew Cumberbatch, as well as our teams providing extra support and information in order that Grant Thornton could carry out that review.
I suppose what we have to think about is when you get objections such as this is that it does actually cost the council not only in financial time but officer time as well, and it takes them away from doing other things. So it would be worth knowing the overall cost in terms of officer time, but also the cost to the residents of Warrington of this objection, and I suppose other objections as well, because it's something that maybe is obviously it's been done in maybe good faith, but you then consider the impact upon the workings of the council, and then the impact of the cost to the council taxpayer. So it is something which has gone on, and I suspect that it will be a significant cost.
I mean, we can certainly, when I've agreed those figures with Grant Thornton, report that back to this committee. I think the issue. Excuse me. I think the issue is what we can't do is undermine the process where quite rightly members of the public can object to things that the council has done. But clearly it's taken a lot longer than we would have hoped to get to a position of deeming that what we've done was not unlawful.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else now? Okay, Andrew, do you want to continue your report?
Yes, Chair. So just finally, I wanted to update members on the status of the 17-18 audit. We've now recommenced work on that audit now that the objection has been finalised. Unfortunately, due to annual leave on both sides, both on our side and the council's side, the audit didn't really recommence until the last couple of weeks. And I do anticipate that it will take between 6 to 8 weeks to complete that audit. That is in part because the passage of time has meant that we've had to go back through the work that we did back in June and July 2018 and update that on the basis that new information and new audit evidence is available to us that we need to consider on the areas of virtually every area of the audit. But it's also due to the fact that we've had to extend some of the planned work that we did around certain areas of the accounts, and the most significant of those is around the valuation of the council's land and buildings, where it is, I think, an underestimate to say that we've significantly extended the work that we do around that area in today than what we did 2 years ago, and that's largely in response to what our regulator is expecting. So we are having to not only update but significantly extend the work that we do in that area, and that will take some time. There are some issues that have come to light through that piece of work that we've done over the last couple of weeks, and then we've also hit a little bit of a stumbling block due to a bit of sickness with the capital accountant and the finance team. So I don't want to commit to reporting to the November committee on it. We are certainly hoping to have done all the work by then, but whether we actually can report and make the paper deadline for November, I wouldn't want to commit to at this stage, but certainly the audit will be there or thereabouts by the time of the next audit committee. And then, of course, as soon as that audit is concluded, we will automatically proceed with the 2018-19 audit and bring that to a conclusion. It may well be that we're able to actually report on both audits at the same time, but obviously we'll need to consider that as we progress. Happy to take any questions, Chair, on that.
Are there any comments or questions? Yes, Ian.
Yes, just something, Andrew, partly answered my question. I was going to say, this of course is the 17-18 audit we're talking about the I want to know about the 18-19. I was going to ask, which I say is partly answered. Any feeling whatsoever about when we might get that result? Well, you won't say any more, Andrew. I mean, I was surprised when you said just now that it might come at the same time, because I'd assumed, maybe wrongly, that there was probably quite a lot of extra work to do as well, but maybe not.
There isn't as much extra work to do on the 18-19 audit as there is actually on the 17-18 audit, bizarrely. So we do believe that we'll be able to resolve that in a quicker time than we have been able to do with the 17-18 audit. But obviously we do need to conclude on 17-18 first. So we do need to take each year in turn. As I say, I don't want to commit to any timescales, but I do expect the 17-18 audit to be largely complete by the time of the next audit committee. The thing that I don't want to commit to is whether we were able to actually report to that meeting, unfortunately, just because I think it will be very tight around that. But the 18-19 audit will be completed soon after, and I'm confident that now that the objection is out of the way, we should be able to report both of these in the new year.
Okay.
Chair, is the objection to the 18-19 accounts, is that still ongoing or is that settled?
No, that remains ongoing, and there are still discussions ongoing with the council around some additional information that we need in order to fully investigate that objection.
Thank you.
Is it likely that there would be any delay in those 18-19 accounts if with the objection, do you think?
I don't anticipate the 18-19 objection taking too much longer to resolve, so I believe that I'll be able to conclude that in good time for reporting on the 18-19 audit.
Okay, thanks, Andrew.
Yeah. Can the objector withdraw the objection?
I don't think that's for me. He could, I guess, but I imagine that's quite unlikely.
Okay. Just think we've heard how much this is costing the council. So it might be a matter of assessing, whether not saying it's not a valid objection, but whether it is worth pursuing it at the cost of the council.
I guess that is a matter. I guess that's a matter for the objector rather than myself.
I appreciate that.
Okay, Andrew, have you any more to add to what you've said now?
No, thank you, Chair.
Okay, well, thank you for your report. And that, I think, colleagues, concludes our business. So can I thank you for your attendance? Normally, I wish you a safe journey home, but that's a bit superfluous now. So, good night.
Thanks, Chair. Good night.
Good night.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you. Good night.